our speaker is Dr. Clouser from the University of Florida. Dr. Clouser is the Professor and Associate Chair of Food Resources Economics. His specialty is public policy. He also serves as FACT Senior Fellow. He's a familiar face around FACT. He's always instrumental in helping us plan our CCC and ACC programs. And as always, it's good to have you with us, Rod, and I enjoy working with him, so I know you guys are going to love this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rod this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So how many of you drove in at night last night? Okay, so you already win a prize for being able to find this place at night. And we won't ask the Nassau County Commissioner how difficult it was to find this place. So anyway, a couple years ago we were over here. One of the commissioners from the county was coming in late at night, and he owns a business, and he's in his business truck, and he said he was coming in for a conference, I remember, and he said he had a difficult time getting past the gate at night. So anyway, it's a very difficult place to find. I'm going to talk with you for a while this morning about form and function. The way that the room is set up, I'm going to have to stick a little bit closer to the computer to control it up here. I usually put it out so I don't have to stand behind a podium. And then FAC is filming this like they do everything else, and they got backup video and recording devices up here as well. You'll see there's something a little bit unusual about this, and this presentation is usually done by Ginger with the Association of Counties. Ginger is unavailable today, and that happens from time to time, and every 2 or 3 years it seems like I sub in. And actually she had taken material over time that I had put together and incorporated it in her presentation. So she deserves most of the credit for this. And then you'll see contributions by me. I'm trying to clarify that. So slides that look like that with that IFAS are completely mine. And then slides with bold blue text indicate it's text I've added to what Ginger had in the presentation. And then we switch back and forth within. She may incorporate some more of this in next year's presentation. Ginger is always interesting, as I've watched her for years giving her presentations, and she always starts out her presentations by letting the people know who she is and a little bit about her life. So I decided I adopt that. But you know, when Ginger started, she had small young children, girls, and so she had all these cute stories. I don't have any cute stories or anything like that. But I thought I'd give you from my perspective, it's good to be back in the ACC class, the CCC class. I think the last time I did a class in CCC was in January, and I always enjoy getting to see you and meet you. Some of you I know well enough now. I know names. I know a lot of the counties that you're in, but I don't know everything. People always wonder, so I say I'm a Purdue Boilermaker by degree, but a Florida Gator by good fortune. And Purdue, you don't talk about football, you talk about basketball. So, you know, you get excited about that. I've been at the University of Florida for 35 years, you can see down there. So I've been there a long time doing extension and public policy work. I started my first work with the Association of Counties in 1986. So by my calculations, next year will be 30 years working with the Association of Counties as well. Now, this is a big disbelief, and Commissioner Maddox is in the room, and I think most of you know that Commissioner Maddox was a football player at FSU. And so you know I usually wear one of these Gator pins because I know who provides me my check and signs it. And actually I'd tell Commissioner Maddox if he can get me a little tomahawk pin, I'll wear both of them at the same time. Everybody assumes that there's this huge dislike between FSU and the University of Florida. And that's not the case. Well, that's not the case for me, because I approach the philosophy that there's probably one Saturday, and it's usually the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I'm not an FSU fan. At the same time I say that, everybody should realize that if you sort of hope that FSU and UF go into that game with a great record, there's national title implications for the state, and that's a good deal. So I don't see this dislike with Florida State that a lot of people think exists with that. After finishing my PhD, I decided I didn't want to spend more time at a university. I needed a break. So I had a choice when I was offered a job with the U.S. House Budget Committee, or the governor of Indiana offered me the position to be state economist. He offered me the same salary. He offered me a parking place outside the State House, and he gave me my own key to the State House, so that was an easy choice, although that House Budget Committee would have been interesting. He turned out to be one of the most popular and best liked governors ever in Indiana. Now, Ginger and I do share some characteristics. I'm a political wonk, therefore I appreciate what you do. And just like Ginger, I'm a strong believer in home rule, and the best government is local government. And there was a survey that came out recently again, and who fared best in terms of local, state, or federal government? It is the local government, so counties and municipalities always fare better. Everybody knows that you can be tracked down in the counties, but you know, if I were walking up to Tallahassee and I would walk into the Speaker's office or the Senate President's office and say, I would like to visit with Senator Gardner, they'd say, yeah, fat chance. And you know, that's not the case with you. People see you around. And then the last line's a little bit of a throw off. So you can see, people can pull wool over my eyes sometime, but first you can see I wasn't born at night. And the way I look, you can tell I wasn't born last night. And but I want to tell you, there's some good news with that in Florida. Because when I look at Florida's top total population, I'm still relatively a young guy. So, you know, if I was in other states, that wouldn't be the case, but it's a lot different. Most of you are aware Florida's back to growing, about 250,000 people a day. So we're going to see huge change, or 250,000 people a year at the pace right now. So we're going to see huge changes in the state in the next 3-4 years again. And there's already some economic news that's been happening in certain counties. I've been following Osceola County. I was talking with the 2 commissioners there. I don't know how many of you have seen the proposal by Deseret Ranch that's on the boards and books, and it's got support from the environmental groups, but I think it was develop 133,000 acres for 500,000 people over a 60-year build out and not even starting for 20 years. But think how that would change Osceola County, plus they've got other industry as well. So Florida's still an exciting place to be. So Ginger refers to today's class as a county civics lesson. She gives you some idea of what's going on there. And she starts out with the history of Florida counties and what a county is and how it differs from the city and the form of government in your specific county. We'll do a quick review of the charter other county offices, some differences with charter counties. I know you have it in your book, but don't look ahead. So we've got some easy questions here. How many counties does Florida have? 67, right? How many counties did Florida start with? 2. And the 2 counties were? Okay, so we'll answer questions like that. So first there was Escambia and St. Johns County. The state was split. Those were the beginning 2 counties. Every other county represented here in this room is a part of one of those counties. It's split off in some way. Now, I don't remember I have it in there. I probably do someplace in the presentation. But what was the last county developed or adopted in the state of Florida? Any idea on that? Well, Gilchrist County, right? Do you remember the year? 1925. And it split off from Alachua County. So we've had counties developing in Florida over that time period. And you can see there it was a provisional government. It started in 1821. It was made up of a judicial system, appointed county judges, clerks, and sheriffs, basically. So it's very similar to the structure we had today, but one of the main differences was government was administered through the court system by 5 justices of the peace. So your position actually was held back in the beginning by people who were referred to as county judges, county justices. And so there's been a little change there. So this is the way it was split. So Escambia and St. Johns County were designated by Andrew Jackson, who at that time was a military commander, and that's how Florida started. And then it's continued to evolve over time. So in 1822, Jackson and Duvall came along. You can see there. Florida entered the Union in 1838. First Constitution was adopted by the state then. First constitutional status was given to counties in 1861. So from when county was first established until there was constitutional status given was a 40-year span. So they were operating sort of ad hoc and going there. And then counties and charters were given a separate article, constitutional, in 1885, and I did have that date in there. So Gilchrist was the last county that was formed in Florida in 1925. So if we looked over time, so we talked about 1821 when it started. So look what had happened by 1845 and the number of counties that had been added. So it's always interesting. So if you look over there on the east coast part of the state, you'll see St. Lucie County down there towards the bottom. It's about the second or big one in. You see how Dade County stretched up and included Palm Beach and Broward. So there was more splitting that was going to occur. If we jump forward to 1925, then this is what it looked like. And you can see there that at that point in time, when I got this map from whoever initially drew it, Gilchrist from Alachua County was still pending. Gulf County was being formed out of Calhoun. Indian River was being formed from St. Lucie, and Martin was being formed from Palm Beach and St. Lucie. So the changes were still pretty rapid through 1925. Now Ginger continues with the history lesson, is there's only one county in the state that's ever been abolished, and that was Fayette County. And that was in 1834, and it was actually dissolved and became a part of Jackson County. So Jackson grew. There's been some name changes. New River became Baker and Bradford County. So that's, they took one county and changed it into two. And probably the wisest decision ever made was the one to change Orange County's name from Mosquito County. Was Osceola part of that too? Yep. Okay, so they were part of that. But you know, it might be a little bit difficult for Visit Florida to pitch, we want everybody to come to Mosquito County. Okay, yeah, if you think about that, so that was probably a wise change. And then I think the last change that actually took place was changing Dade to Miami-Dade, and that took place just a little over a decade ago. There have been many attempts to form counties. So in 1928, they tried to form a county called Call. It didn't happen. 1917, they tried to form a county. Obviously, 1965, what was popular to happen? The president had just been assassinated, so there were lots of states that were all of a sudden interested in having Kennedy County. So that didn't happen in Florida. And then Hialeah County was tried twice formation, and that's only been about 15 years ago. And there's not been another attempt since then. Okay, so it is possibly constitutionally that you could form another county. Still today, it still have to have approval because the authority given to the counties is given by the legislature in general. So if we looked at it in 1997, that's what it is. That's when Dade changed their name. So that's pretty much the composition of the state right now. Got 67 counties, we have 20 charter counties. How many of you are from a charter county? So Osceola is charter, Leon is charter, Clay is charter? Columbia is. So it's interesting. Columbia is a good example. So the last couple of charter counties have been more rural counties. So the last county that was actually adopted a charter was Wakulla County. So that made the 20th county in the state. And those counties tend to be much larger populations. So Columbia is different. Columbia is a relatively small population compared to a lot of the others, but Columbia has a charter as well. Many of the charter counties, besides being urban, also tend to be in high growth areas. Some of them are coastal in nature and different things like that. I actually counted at one point in time, and I haven't done it recently, but those 20 charter counties have in the neighborhood, the way I remember it, is more than 70% of the population in the state. So they're the big counties. And you can find, you remember the book you got from the Association of Counties about government? If you look in there, you can see the different facts and figures like that. Now I want to talk to you for just a second about diversity in the state. So I looked at the 2013 estimate. So Florida had 19.3 million people. We're really up to, their best guess now is about 19.9 million people with another year. The size difference in our state is huge. Dade County has 2.58 million people. Liberty County has 8,400 plus people. So you can see the extremes. Let's talk about geographic area. Technically, although Osceola County is really a huge county, Palm Beach measures the largest in square miles at almost 2,000 square miles. Think of it in this term, a square mile is 640 acres. So there's 2,000 of those in Palm Beach County. Union County, on the other hand, has a total size of 243 square miles, so relatively small. The thing I think is most interesting to me is the economic base. Now, they don't update median household income as often, so the last I could find was 2011. So the wealthiest county in terms of per capita income is one that's neighboring here, and it's neighboring in a roundabout way, but it's St. Johns County. It's basically separated by Duval. And St. Johns County has benefited probably primarily for some issues with inner city Jacksonville and the schools in Jacksonville. And it started happening 10, 15 years ago. A lot of people work in Jacksonville, but they move south into St. Johns County, and their income has been jumping over time. But there's the average or the median household income, which means half of the incomes are higher, half are lower. That's right, the midpoint is $60,000. And that's pretty significant, and it's probably gone up slightly since then. On the other extreme is Dixie County, which is a small coastal county. It's heavily timber-oriented and stuff like that. And the median per capita or household income in that county is $30,967. So you can see it almost doubles based on size. But the one that's really interesting to me is this one. So if I raise a 1 mil property tax in Miami-Dade County, it raises $196.3 million. If I do a 1 mil property tax in Liberty County, I raise $198,000. So you're talking about a difference there that is huge. So let me ask you a question. Is it cheaper to build a road, a paved road, in Dixie or Liberty County than it is in Palm Beach County? Okay, probably not. The difference is if you have to purchase right away and do stuff like that, it can be a little bit different. It's probably going to be different in those counties. But whether it's concrete, whether it's asphalt, or whatever it is, wire, rebar, or all that stuff, they don't differentiate, but because you're a small county, you can't raise much money. So you can figure out, and I did not check these figures, and Jack, you can jump in if you know, but that's why Florida has fiscally constrained counties. That's why the legislature gives them some consideration. It's why there's what used to be called READY, the Rural Economic Development Initiative. It's still called READY, but they had areas of critical concern. It's now to change of areas of opportunity, rural areas of opportunity, because you're really hamstrung in the provision of services in Florida if you're from one of these small rural counties because you just don't raise much revenue. And it used to be at one point in time of the small counties in Florida that about 90% of them were at what we would consider academically close to full fiscal capacity, which if you're levying at least 85% of your budget authority, you're in. Jack?
Well, and if you had a county that maxed out at 12%, for what gas tax in 1999, you're actually losing ground every year as cars get more energy efficient. The state of Florida has an inflation rate on their fuel tax that's this index that the counties are is not. So as inflation goes up or fuel goes up, it still stays at what cents a gallon.
Yeah, and so Jack brings out an interesting point because there's that issue with the gas tax. But we know in general that it's sort of been mandated, legislated that they're going to get more fuel efficient. We know when prices got real high, consumers drove less, okay? But what we often forget, and this is one point I try to stress in most presentations I do, we can't be like an ostrich and stick our head in the ground and assume what happens nationally and internationally in the world doesn't have impact in Florida in our individual counties. So most of you are benefiting right now in your county, or most of your constituents in your county are benefiting from low gasoline prices in relative terms. It's down over 80 cents a gallon compared to a year ago, 90, maybe even 90 cents a gallon. But of course that generates less revenue in terms of gas tax revenue. But then you have to ask your question, why are we down that low? Anybody know? Anybody have any idea why we're that low?
Because oil prices are down.
Okay, and why are oil prices down? Supply is ramped up, right. So what's the speculation on why supply is ramped up? Okay, so this shows the convoluted circle that happens economically. So when the price got real high, what happened in North Dakota and South Dakota and all those places? A little process called fracking. Okay, because if the price gets high enough, fracking becomes feasible. You start extracting more gas and stuff. What impact does that have? That causes Saudi Arabia and the oil-producing countries to sell less. So this is postulated right now, the reason we have abundant supply is it's speculated that the oil-producing countries led by Saudi Arabia are ramping up their production way over on a per-day basis to bring down oil prices, which makes fracking less feasible, which has implications long-term and secures their market shares. So something that's happening at a whole different level affects all of you and the type of services you can provide. So you can understand maybe a little bit better why some of the small areas become really concerned when they see things being whacked a little bit at the state level, or their ability to raise revenue isn't there. So I want to ask the question. I really don't want to pick on the people I know better than others, but so I want someone, well, and I'll pick on David because David's already done this class before. And David's from Marion County. So David, I want you to switch hats. Okay. You're no longer Marion County Commissioner. You're a Dixie County Commissioner, or you're Gilchrist County Commissioner. Okay. So you see what happens property tax rise, what do? You see what happens on revenue, property tax rise, and they have services they have to provide, and let's just stick with a road example, what do?
Well, we ask the private sector to donate and hope for the best. Yeah.
Anybody having a lot of success of the private sector donating millions and billions of dollars for roads?
You'd max out your millage rate, probably.
Okay, so you max out your millage rate. But guess what? If you max out your millage rate in Liberty County with those numbers I give you,
still nothing.
It gives you 1.9. It gives you 1.9 million now. Boy, you can pave a mile of road. Yeah. So, you know, what I want to do in this part is remind everyone, and we say it very often, there's not a cookie cutter approach to Florida. There's not a cookie cutter approach to being a commissioner. There's not a cookie cutter approach to raising revenue and funding services that you need to. But we all have to take into considering the challenging tasks. Now, I've made it sound like, oh, woe, the poor rural counties, and that's not indeed the case. Because if you take Dade County with a population of 2.5 million, it's pretty tough even if you raise a bunch of revenue. But I also have an old line that a professor used to use on me, and with my work at the university, I used to be in Pinellas County quite a bit. And so Pinellas County is one of the Florida counties that's considered built out. So that's a Clearwater area, if you're not familiar with it. And I need to go down there, and Fred Marquis and Gay Lancaster were administrator and assistant administrator at that time. And I said, we need a little bit more money for this program in the county. And they said, we just can't do that. And I said, why? And they said, well, we don't have enough revenue. Of course, I had done my homework, and I went down there. Their millage rate was in the 3.6 range. So, you know, they had plenty of capacity. And I said, why don't you have any money? And they said, well, you know, all the money we raised, we spent. It reminded me of something that a professor told me. So we also have to take into consideration that this factor, and I said it to Gay and Fred the day I was down there. It's not the high cost of living in Pinellas County, and I'm not picking on Pinellas. It's not the high cost of living in the county. Sometimes it's the cost of living high. Okay? So what happens in most urban counties relative to rural counties and types of services they provide? They're ramped up, right? And it's expected of your citizens, so you're sort of caught in that difficult position. But the bottom line, and I've preached too long on this one, is that we need to be sensitive to the fact of the diversity of this state, this cookie cutter approach. And when you get into some of these meetings you're having, or you're talking about policy priorities, they're probably going to be pretty significant differences. But the key is down there at the bottom. together, all 67 counties have to serve all Floridians. Now, those of you who's taken our advanced commissioner class will hear sometimes, every resident is a constituent for you in your county. It's not that case. So Commissioner Greep, okay, so I think it's Cheryl. I met her before, and she was a city commissioner in Kissimmee, okay? So there were constituents who lived in Kissimmee that were hers, but those who were outside that incorporated area, they weren't hers. She didn't have to worry about their election or services. Now she's a county commissioner. What does she have? She have all those people outside. She's still got the Kissimmee people. And the other cities. So, you know, it changes, but all people in Florida are a member of a county where you are a commissioner, and all of you combined have to do it, and I may show it in this presentation or one tomorrow. And I use Marion County, Alachua County as my example, but I use Marion County, I think, in the slide I prepared. So if you're driving down Road 200 in Marion County, so that's the last major exit on the south end of Marion County. There's a bunch of hotels there on the left side. There's a bunch of development out. There's a little Disney welcome area, or used to be, right there. That's closed down. But, you know, it's really built up around there. But you don't have to go very far west of the interstate, and that's where the county takes over some of the road. You know, it's where the state may have a portion of it, but eventually it turns into the city of Ocala, okay? And so if you're driving up down that road, do you think it makes a difference if it's a city road or a county road? No. Your citizens are just concerned it's bumpy, it's congested, and then they want to call and complain. Okay, so the cooperation that you're going to have to do in serving together is also going to be with more than just your counties, because there's municipalities, and some of the counties have a huge number of municipalities. So let's shift for a second to what is a political subdivision, and a county is. It's a political subdivision of the state. It was established by the state, and it was to execute services and functions at the local level. What's a municipality? Well, it's a local government that its citizens serves. It was created by charter. So what's the major difference between cities and counties in Florida? Every city that has been established is established by charter. They're all charter governments. What did we just learn about counties? There's only 20, okay? So there's not very many. And actually a lot of counties who've even had an interest in that have found it difficulty in getting it adopted. You can see it doesn't happen all that often. And I'll show you some stuff about establishment of charter counties a little bit later. So you can see that. So Florida counties, there's those tension and overlapping functions and services with municipalities. And home rule can make that more difficult. And your charter may make it more difficult in some instances if you do that. And then the other thing I want to talk a little bit about is special district, and it's a local government created by another level of government for a specific purpose. We'll get into a little bit more detail as we go through that. So what do counties do? And there's a long list there. I'm not going to go through those all, but they have state mandated duties that they have to do. And then there's been this expansion of public services, and I did that in the orientation right after the people who were elected in November could attend. There's really been this big explosion. So if I went back, just say 100 years. So let's go back to 1915. What was the major functions in counties in Florida? Keep care of the roads, keep the records, death stuff, put people in jail if they need to be put in jail, right? That was basically it. Well, if you look down here, they have expanded like crazy. So there's public health, there's public welfare issues. I don't know how many of you know it, and everybody always acts surprised. There's a poll that's done by the University of South Florida, usually every year. It's called the Sunshine State Poll, sometimes it's every other year. So they use Nielsen, I believe, is the corporation they use, which is a well-represented and respected surveying firm. They have a degree of error of about 3 to 3.5%. They poll 2,000 and some Floridans and ask them what's the biggest issues. What's been the biggest issue for a long period of time now in Florida? Economic development. Economic development. Economic development. What comes in usually in the top 3, 4, or 5? What's behind economic development, do you think? What? education. Okay? And then you go down. So it's always interesting. You got to watch polls like that because I always look at them to sort of see, and I have some interest in economic development, but I always want to see where the water comes in. So if you look at water, sewage, some of those issues like that, in those polls, they tend to only be identified as a really critical issue by 1 to 3% of the people. So does that mean it's not an issue in the state of Florida? No. It means when I get up in the morning, I turn on the tap water, it comes out pretty clear. It doesn't taste horrible, and they're not charging me an arm and leg for it. Okay? So you got to watch the polls like that, but you have to be aware of how your duties and responsibilities have shifted over what your predecessors used to do. So, these is where counties were established. So there's Article 7 and Article 8 of the Constitution. Those of you who took the new orientation class knows I always ask the question, how many of you read your job description before you ran for office? Okay, and surprisingly not that many have. And then I ask them, well, if you read your job description and understand it, where did you understand it or where did you get it from? And I usually give some oddball choices and I do them by statute. So I said Florida Statute 12501, Florida Statute 193-461. Anybody know what that was? That's the use value assessment law in Florida. I gave them another Florida Statute 12 something, I can't remember. You know what that one is? The line of succession for the governor in Florida. I gave them all these weird things, okay? And it was a complete crapshoot. I mean, only about a third of the people ever realized that the duties and responsibilities of a commissioner are in the Constitution and in Florida Statute 12501, as well as some other places, and most of them don't read it, okay? So when I ask them where they got their description from, I talked to a former commissioner, the supervisor of elections told me it was this, or I found this on the web. Okay, so you need to go back in and sort of look at some of those things if you have any questions. And then there's the compliance with other forms of state law that are identified there. Here's some ways that Ginger tried to approach the county services and different terminology. So clean up, prevent environmental risk, provide to hand to those in need. That's the public health and welfare issues that came up in the past. Here's what I did, and those of you who are at the new commissioner orientation actually saw this. So I went into chapter 125 and I just started making lists to give people some idea. So when I get the phone call, it's what is it I'm supposed to do? So it's specifically identified in there. You do things like issue proclamations, you elect officers for the board. Now, that's not easy always in every county. Okay, and some of you may be from those counties and experiencing that. And then one of the really most difficult ones I've seen over time is setting your meeting times. Has that been an issue for any of you? Well, it used to be if you had afternoon meetings or something like that, a lot of people would come and say, I can't afford to take off work to sit here all day. And then if you had night meetings, and if you're in one of those counties where they go really, really late night meetings, especially if there's some type of hearing or something like that, then you heard the opposite issue, is I can't be here all night and go to work the next day. So there's some counties that even struggle with easy decisions like this that you have to make. Then the services that are identified are fire, hospital, ambulance, welfare, parks, preserves, it goes on and on. I didn't even write them all. You have responsibility for maintaining the county buildings. You have to enforce comp plan. You got to enforce the building and housing regulations. You get to choose, not you really, but your citizens get to choose if you're a dry county or not a dry county. But if you're not a dry county, then you enforce the regulation of the sale of alcohol in your counties. You enter into agreements with other government agencies. You levy and collect taxes. You establish the county budget. And that's not a comprehensive list. It sort of keeps going on and on from there. Duties and authority, Ginger double up on this and identified where you can find those duties and authorities. And let's switch over to a form of county government. Now, I failed to tell you at the start of this, there's this little conflict with the small county coalition meeting that's going on. So here's what I propose that we do. I'm going to try to cut 10 minutes off of both presentations, and then we're going to shorten the break by 5. That'll give us out 25 minutes early, and those of you who need to go to the Small County Coalition meeting can do that, and then we'll start right back up at 1:30 with the panel discussion. So I'm going to try to make this one a little bit shorter. We'll have to take a break between this and the next presentation because I need to set up the computer a little bit different. Then we'll come back and we'll shoot for 11:30, 11:35 stop time so people can go to that meeting, or those who aren't a part of that meeting can have a little bit longer for lunch. So the forms of county government, we have a county commission form, we have a commission county administrator, and we have a commission elective chair, which is referred to as a executive form. Now I spelled these out in a little bit more detail. Remember, bold blue text is stuff I added. How many of you are from a county with a county commission form of government? How many of you even know what a county commission form of government is? That means commissioners basically are not only responsible for policy, but the implementation of the policy. You don't have a county coordinator, you don't have a county manager at all. And that's not a atypical form of counties in Florida, especially in the small rural counties. And I'm actually going to show you a list that sort of identifies what they are. And then the second form there is the commissioner county administrator form. And you can see I put in there, the county manager administrator is appointed by and serves at the pleasure of the board. That's the predominant model we have in Florida. Now it's been called some different things. I don't know if there's any that still exists. Now, if you don't know, we got two very, very experienced county administrators sitting in the room. So we got Jack Brown back over here, who's been in Taylor. He's also been elected commissioner, and now he's out in Escambia. And we got Lee Niblock, who was in Marion and is now in Alachua County. And they both got a lot of years of experience. But, and I may be wrong, but this used to be sort of semi-popular in the rural areas, but they didn't really call them managers in many instances. They call them county coordinators. Okay, but the county coordinator doesn't have the authority and responsibility technically per se that a county manager does. And so what's happened over time is most of the counties in Florida has gone to that type of government. And there's the commission elected chairman executive form. So I want to read through this. The county executive form has an elected board of commissions and an elected county executive. Okay, elective commissioners, elective executive. The elected county executive exercise the executive responsibilities assigned by the charter and approves ordinances by signature or allowing it to become approved without signature by failing to veto it or may veto any ordinance. The county executive veto can be overridden by a 2/3 vote of the members of the board. So there's some key things in there. So one key thing that you should note out of that is that the county executive is elected, okay, and they execute responsibilities assigned by who? The charter. So what does that tell you? It's going to have to be a charter county, so we got 20, so 3 fit in there. And then they have power to do certain things, but it can be vetoed by the legislative body. So it's the county version of what the Florida legislature looks like. You know, governor, House. House can pass laws, commission can pass laws, the executive can veto it, comes back to the legislative body, and it can be overridden. It's unusual, and when we get to the counties that we talk about this, I think it'll become understandable on why those counties maybe had that form, but I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the list. So here's the list. This was put together by Jewett. This is the list that appears in the county government guide that all of you should have, or you should have in your county. So you can see over there the commission form. So the commissioners not only make policy, they implement policy. On the date of this, and I can't remember what year this was. I think this was maybe 2012 version. The counties where the commissioners do it all is Calhoun, Franklin, Hamilton, Jefferson, Lafayette, Levy, Liberty, Madison, Suwannee, and Union. So all rural in nature, okay? And like I say, that doesn't mean that they don't have a county coordinator or something, but it's under the commission form of government. You can see, pardon?
Madison was under commission form?
It says here that Madison was, but it's got a star to it. I know, and I believe Madison is a good example of how it changed. So is Alan Cherry still up there? So Alan started out as a county coordinator, right?
Yes.
So Alan sort of fell in that gray area. That's probably why Madison is in that list with the star. But what the commission did is change that appointment to a county manager or county manager title. And so Madison falls off that list. Okay, and there may have been some in the others because I go back far enough in Florida. Gilchrist County used to be that way too, but they changed it. And who was it? Ronnie, when he was over there as county administrator, I can't remember who the administrator was when it changed from a coordinator to a manager position. So there's been that. Jack?
Well, I was just going to say there's nuances also between county administrators, even if a lot of county administrators are adopted under 125, some are under charter that have different, a little bit different duties and responsibilities. County managers is a term not so much embraced in statute, really the county administrator that 125 talks about, but county manager is more often defined as administrators as well, 125, or it may have some differences as well.
So one of the things that's going to happen is when the book is updated this time, this is going to have to be changed because there are some changes on this, okay? And it'll have to be better defined. What I want you to look at is over on the far right-hand side on the executive form. So you knew they had to be charters. So the three that are identified there are Duval, Miami-Dade, and Orange, okay? So one thing that's sort of clear is if you go back to the Florida Constitution, there's some constitutional charter counties. And I believe these three are all part of them. The one that's not on the list there is Monroe County, which is Key West. So let's talk a little bit about the city of Jacksonville. I used to be over there a lot working with them. So what does the Jacksonville County Commission, which they call a council, I believe, what does it look like? How many members do they have? I think they've got about 15, but then they also have elected mayor. Okay? So if you ever watch or attend a Duval County Commission meeting, there's all kinds of proposals come up. They have electronic voting. You think you're in a small version of the legislature. You know, there's a person who runs the agenda, does the brief reading of the titles. They have the discussion. They pass it. Who does it go to? To the mayor. The mayor can sign it into law, let it become law without signature, or veto it. What happens? It goes back. Okay. Now, one thing that's sort of interesting, and I've been working with the Florida Association of Counties for a long time, is that there's been a couple of times and couple of instances when people in those counties have been really active in the association. So it was before she was mayor, but Teresa Jacobs, who is the current mayor commissioner of Orange County, was very active in this association and actually served as president. You know, Alberta Hipp and some of the others, when they were council members in Duval County, were very active. But there is a whole different form of government there that's different than anything else in Florida. And then the thing I don't understand, and I've asked this of Ginger a couple times, then we have another type, and to me it's sort of an in-between. Do we have anybody here from Volusia County? Okay, so Volusia County has an elective executive who's a commissioner, but they don't have this concept of the veto and all that stuff like that. You know, they sign all ordinances, they have it. So there's been some discussion going on down there if it should move more like the other counties in Florida. But there's a mix, and so Jack's brought up some of the issues with the county, still talking about managers instead of administrators. We probably still got the concept of coordinators hanging around a little bit. And then we got some counties that still don't have any of those things. They may have somebody from the land use department who's helping them doing something or whatever, but they don't have someone by that title. Any questions about that? So the other county officers, how many of you were elected and actually went into office last November? Okay, so you've been in office now for a year, so you've probably all become very familiar with your other constitutional officers, but we're going to run through them a little bit there. There's 5. This is another question I ask commissioners sometimes, and sometimes I do it right after election, and sometimes I do it 6 months after election, but I ask them to name the constitutional, well, yeah, first question I usually ask is how many other constitutional officers there are. I get pretty good on a response on that one, but I ask them to name them, and it's more difficult what you think. They don't always remember who they are, so we'll run through these sort of briefly. And you can see they're also part of that Article 8 of the Constitution. So we got the sheriff, and I sort of identified the responsibilities. We got the property appraiser, we got the tax collector, we got the supervisor election, we got the clerk of courts. Now, I want to go back. So, and I don't want people to think that I'm picking on the sheriff and public safety, but we actually have a part of the panel this afternoon, a sheriff and a county administrator comes in, because one of the points of disagreement sometimes in Florida counties recently has been between the county commission and the sheriff. And that happens, I think, somewhat based on the fact that a sheriff, if they don't like the budget allocation provided by the Board of County Commissioners, can go to the governor and the cabinet, and they can appeal the decision of the board. And once the governor and the cabinet make a decision, that's not appealable back. So, and I don't want to, I want to be sensitive on this, because do we have, I know one person in the room where a county where they're having that discussion this year. Do we have any others? There was threats in Marion in the last couple of years, I think. Anybody else had threats from their sheriff in the office? Okay, so there's an issue right now. It's been very public. It's in the paper. So Alachua County's having that. I don't want to go into a lot of detail. And there's always a possibility, I guess it can settle before it gets there. Okay, but no chance. Okay, not public record. No. Yeah. So, but anyway, what becomes interesting, then you've got a portion of your budget that you think you control that you really don't have control over, and you leave it up to the governor and the cabinet. So I'll go through in the Intergovernmental Relations Act. So Commissioner Hall, can I ask you, can you name me the members of the cabinet right now for Florida?
I'm Smith.
Smith, excuse me.
Yeah. You got the governor, you got the chief financial officer, you got the Adam Putnam, the
Commissioner of Agriculture and Community Services.
There. That's 1, 2. You've got Atwater, the chief financial officer, called that agriculture. You got the attorney general.
Right. Okay. Congratulations. You got all 4. Pam Bondi.
Yeah.
Okay. What's interesting about the governor and the cabinet when they get to make a vote? He just named it. There's 4 of them. How do you make a vote? What happens when there's a tie? Anybody knows what the Constitution allows for if there's a tie? No. The side the governor voted on prevails. So if it's a 2-2 vote and the governor voted no, it fails. If it's a 2-2 vote and the governor voted yes. So if you want to rest assured that the only way you don't get something passed like that is you have to secure the other 3 votes. That's the only way that the governor doesn't really control what's going on. But the bottom line on this, and I think most of you realize it now, much of your budget is sort of tied up. Much of your budget you don't necessarily have control over. You've got suggestions, but the final decision may not be with you. And then you've got some, so like the tax collector, they submit theirs to the DOR for review and approval, when that comes about. You've all experienced, well, you haven't yet, but you will be experiencing probably next year, because I'm sure Florida doesn't want to be, some of the snafus we've had in the voting issues. And so what's happened to expenditures at supervisor of election offices over time? They've skyrocketed because of the issues that's come about related to that. And then, there's a whole different variety of ways that clerk of courts can work. They, in many instances, they're the clerk to the board, and they can be a budget or a fee officer. A budget office means it's your job to allocate it. Fee is that the fees collect, they come back in. Commissioner Green.
There's been some discussion in our chart on right now. One of the things thrown out there, and of course we'll have to vote on it at some point if it comes forward, but just a generalized a comptroller, elected comptroller.
At the state level?
No.
At the local level?
Who
Well,
else does that? Is anyone in the room?
does anybody do that in the room, Jack? Well, it is in some instances, and in some instances it's not.
Well, the Constitution clerk is comptroller unless you have a
charter, which can identify somebody else.
Well, that's what they're looking at. Well, we have a county auditor, that does the duties, but they're talking about, but the county auditor reports to us as part of our staff. So
Mhm.
county auditor, county attorney. But this is an elected.
Yeah, so the only place that could occur without state legislation is you have the charter and your charter has been amended and adopted. Then that can happen. Okay, now I have not heard anything about that being a big issue over the 20 charter commissions, counties in Florida. If anybody else has heard different, speak up. But I haven't heard that be a big issue. But that could only occur if there was changes in state legislation on the constitutional officer elected, or if you're a charter county and you can get the amendment passed and become part of your charter. Any other questions?
I'm trying to, what she just mentioned, I don't, the Constitution, I don't know how you can get elected control.
Well,
With the clerk of the circuit court, we have the same setup that they have, but we're not a charter county, but when it comes to the Rutgers and stuff like that, the clerk of the circuit court still, we have a charter county.
well, no, it's not really like that, because if you are a charter county, you can go in and the clerk of the court does not have to be your budget officer. They do not have to be the clerk of the board. You can establish, we'll appoint whoever we want or this position to it. So a charter obviously gives you a lot more flexibility than under state legislation. It gives you that flexibility if you can get that charter passed by the people in your county, okay?
Combined officers, like combine the supervisor election and the clerk's office.
So I wish somebody was here in Volusia County. So Volusia County they still have elected sheriff, but the charter allows, the way I remember it, for a director of public safety. Guess who's the director of public safety? The elected sheriff, okay? So it's pretty hard for the sheriff when he allocates the budget for the county as the director of public safety probably to say, I didn't fund the sheriff's office correctly.
Statute actually allows any county to appoint a director of public safety.
Who does that?
It
Which county?
allows you to appoint.
Yeah, but Volusia has it within a charter, and they've made the constitutional officer who's elected the director of that. So, a charter allows you a lot of flexibility that wouldn't otherwise happen. I have not heard that as being a big movement around Florida.
Just a point, the constitutional officers normally oppose charters.
Right.
So if you're trying to get a charter, you need to coordinate, make sure you understand that there's going to be a fight going on with the constitutional officers. They see it as an invasion of the charter.
So there was a small rural county years ago that asked some of us from the university to come in and do a financial review of their county. And there was a team of 3 of us went up there, and I'm going to leave the county nameless. And we said, yeah, we can do that, but we can't do it just working on the Board of Commissioners. We have to have the sheriff, we have to have the clerk, we have to have the supervisor election. Guess what they found out as we brought all those people in? The only person who wanted that was the Board of County Commissioners. None of the constitutional officers did. We get a budget, we get to handle it. We don't need anybody looking at us and telling if it's efficient or effective. So, Jack, that's a good point to bring up. Let's move on to a little bit for charter counties. We had the 1968 constitutional revision, which is significant in Florida. The Constitutional Revision Commission, I believe, meets every 20 years. So, it doesn't really change. And how's the Constitution changed a lot in Florida? We do amendments by popular vote, okay, which has changed it significantly. And we fail to realize, and it depends how you feel, but a lot of people feel like that a constitution should be your foundation of government, okay? Well, the Florida Constitution has stuff in there like now that you can't raise pigs in farrowing crates, and nets have to be this size, and then they get it there for a while, and then they repeal it, and there's lots of unusual things that have started appearing. But most of you know that one of the big hang-ups was this concept of Dillon's Rule. Now, I've heard about Dillon's Rule 1,000 times, at least in the last 10 years. But what I find myself is everybody says, well, explain to me what Dillon's Rule is. I always struggle. So first of all, who was Dillon? Does anybody remember that part of the history lesson? I believe he was a Supreme Court judge in the state of Iowa. And if you read up on Dillon, and I would encourage you to, it's pretty interesting. He hated local government officials. And hated is not a strong enough word. He probably despised them. Because from his perspective, the higher you went up in government, the more important and the better people were. So he even is quoted in some places as saying, well, you know, you have to look at the quality of people desiring to serve in that position at the local level, and it's very obviously they don't have the skills to know what's going on, basically. So he became very contentious, and so he had this thing that says, no local government shall not have any power to them. It's not explicitly in the Constitution. No, it's not explicitly a part of the state functions, okay? So a lot of people were objecting to that, so I sort of wrote it out here. It says, local governments were prevented from doing anything not specifically authorized by state laws. Counties who wanted even small changes in their structure or responsibilities had to petition the legislature to get a special act, a statute drafted naming a city or a county and not applicable to the entire state. And so then we had this explosion of local acts, okay? So obviously the post-constitutional revision powers changed that, and they established counties, and they gave counties more home rule authority. And the thing I would say about Dillon is, remember this, if you ever hear what was the main change related to Dillon, is it's no longer assumed that the proof of burden is that if it's not mentioned somewhere specifically in statute, it's not a county or municipal responsibility. That's how I sort of think of it now. So we're going to take a quick look here, and we'll try to be wrapping this up. So charter counties, they're actually identified in the Constitution, Article 8, Section 1. Okay, it's very important. You can see the change. Counties operating under county charter shall have all powers of local self-government not inconsistent with general law. So you can't say I'm going against the content of the state, or with special law approved by the voters. The governor body of a county operating under a charter, they can enact county ordinances not inconsistent with general law, so you don't have to have these special acts all the time anymore. And the charter shall provide which shall prevail in the event of conflict between counties and municipalities. Because your charter identifies if the county adopted rules, who prevails, or each group can have their own set of rules. So charter counties again here. So how's Osceola's charter set up? Do the county adopted rules apply, or do municipalities still have their own say? Do you remember? Okay. Does anybody have one where the county is the overriding that the legislation passed by the counties? Okay.
Yeah, but they have to, I mean, if they don't do an ordinance, it goes with the county, what we do. If they do their own, it's theirs.
Okay. So anyway, you know, it lets the concept of home rule come home by the charter county establishment there. Here's the important parts to remember. Charter commissions. So the Board of County Commissions starts the process, or it can be petitioned to start it. A resolution has to be adopted by the board, or the petition by the people in the county. If it's done by petition, you have to have 15% of the qualified electors of the county requesting that the commission be started. So the 5, 7, or 9 of you, which are the basic size of most commissions in Florida, can either do a resolution if you're interested, or if 15% of the electors in the county come forward with a position, you'll have to do it. Charter adopted by ordinance is covered in section 125.82. It's an alternative way to the provisions, and inclusive. The Board of County Commissioners may propose an ordinance by ordinance or charter consistent with the provisions. Charter Commission composed of an odd number, not less than 11 or more than 15 members. After that process is instituted, the commission has to appoint the members of the board as designated in the ordinance or the initiative. No member of the legislature or the Board of County Commissioners can serve on that. So it's people you get in the counties, and there's 100 ways to do that. Some counties will say, well, we want a person from this area on there. Some will ask each commissioner to identify 2 or 3 people that they would like to see appointed to that. But then there's a process. Charter Commission shall meet for the purpose of the organization within 30 days after the appointments have been made. So it's not a process that's going to drag on forever and ever. Once those people are identified, that 11 to 15 member committee, they elect a chair of that group and a vice chair. 18 months after the initial meeting, unless time is extended by an appropriate resolution by the commissioners, the Charter Commission is supposed to present the results to the board. Now, if a majority of the voters disapprove the proposed charter, if it goes for election, it was established like that, no new referendum may be held for the next 2 years following the date of such disapproval. So they're not going to let you come in and try year after year after year after year. You have a gap. You get a try, give it your best shot. You see if the electors approve it. If they don't, then it's off the books for a 2-year period. Okay? And like I say, if you look back at your county government guide, there's a third of the counties in Florida that now have charters. But if you look at the history and when they've been adopted, it's a slow process. It took Wakulla, I think, multiple attempts. Did it take multiple attempts in Columbia? Or was it multiple attempts in Columbia? So, you know, if you look at some of these, it's not usually necessarily something that just happens automatically nor immediately. So, county charter, you can choose the form of government. You've got the power to tax and unincorporators, may alter the functions of county officers that we've talked about. County ordinances can prevail over municipal. It depends how the charter is established. Special acts that limit power must be approved by the voters. And obviously, a lot of things that people say, well, I like charters, is it basically gives gets citizens involved in the process. So if you've ever had and gone through a charter process, it reminds me a little bit of the budget process in some counties. Is there any county in here when you have your budget, final budget vote, that it's a 15-minute meeting and there's nobody who shows up? Or does that happen in your preceding meetings? Oh, yeah. So that happens in Nassau. Okay. Nobody ever shows up, nobody ever complains.
Anything important, nobody ever shows up.
Okay. So I'm going to flip it over. Is that the case in Marion County, David?
Not really.
Not really.
No, not in our county.
Okay. Not in Osceola. Nobody ever comes to your meeting? They're not even. So, Commissioner, and I've told Nassau County this before that they're lucky.
What I'm saying is the public meeting, nobody showed up.
Yeah, but there was lots of counties in Florida. That's not the typical pattern at all.
But if you have someone that's moving the path of a sea turtle, you'll have a commission chamber full of people.
Or you have that too. Or they leave their trash on the beach.
So, you know, the issues vary, but, you know, the budget, and what I found is on counties that aren't chartered, that are trying to adopt charter, boy, talking about generating interest, it generates interest. So, at least the citizen involvement is there some way. It may not necessarily be in favor of a county charter. So, we're nearing the end of this. So, Ginger identified here that there's some opportunities for intergovernmental relations and the opportunities for regional governance, municipalities, special districts, and service delivery. And those are interesting. The issue with special districts is interesting, and we'll talk about that later in the education program. And then she says it's also the opportunity can be limited by status as a political subdivision. There's some limitations related to that. Intergovernmental relations is a very complex issue. That's going to be the next class that we talk about after we do this little bit of break. And when we get done, I'm not sure if you'll have clear direction, but I think you'll see the complexity of intergovernmental relations in Florida. So we've gone through somewhat quickly and fielded a few questions. Unique history of counties in Florida as contrasted to the state. So one of the things I try to do in the presentation, I try to help you identify the differences in Florida. So what did you learn about the differences in Florida based on what I said, which took a long amount of time? One shoe doesn't fit everything. Florida is very diverse. County size is diverse. County form and function is diverse. County revenue is really diverse. Okay? So it points out this concept. That's also a thing, to me, that causes me a little concern with regional governance. because when you're talking about regional governance, it's not only your county, it's all those counties or municipalities you're participating in. So you have to have consensus building to be able to give it. So it's not necessarily just an easy task. You can't say with the way we went through it as fast as we did. I think you're starting to understand, because most of you have been in office for at least 12 months, right? That you're starting to understand what does a county do. You're starting to understand your constitutional officers and like that. I think the truth of the matter is all of us come back and go backwards and look from history. And what happened in the past is some good indication of where you are at today and maybe where you're headed in the future. So I want to encourage you to do that. You know where your authority comes from. Your primary three areas are what? The Constitution, statutes, charter if you've got it, right? So you go back and there's many things that apply there. Where does the county government fit with respect to other county officers? You hope you have a cooperative nature, but everything from how they run their office to they're elected, and to some ways how they funded differ, okay? And you may not have control over all those situations. And then we've had a brief overview of the county form and function and how you go about a charter process. And I want to encourage everyone, I don't think we do it. So those books, the county government guide, those weren't meant to be. Oh, these were not meant to be paperweights. Okay? You need to open them up occasionally. And if you got a question, if you want to learn about charters, if you want to see those county structures that I was talking about, and I really don't know the one I took it from, if it was the 2000 and, did we update them in 13?
We did, but the 2012 is the most complete.
Okay, so I think I took mine out of 2012. So they may not be completely exactly accurate right now because it's been 2 or 3 years. So, we heard Madison County's gone from a coordinator to a county manager. So we're going to have to shift the columns in that book. But there's a wealth of information. So the charter county stuff in there, the duties, responsibilities, form and function, they're in there. So I want to encourage you to pull it out. If you don't have this, I would like to encourage you as a commission to get your board to purchase this in an electronic version and make it available for your county folks, other county officials, so that they can look at it. And then it has a lot of opportunity. You want to talk about a good civic book for public education? Okay, this is a good civic book. But pull this out and read it, and you'll learn a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to stop with this. I said we'd try to get done about 10 minutes early, and by my watch, we're almost on that. So we sped through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break right now. Okay, that means we're going to start just a couple minutes before 10 o'clock, and we're going to try to finish up by 11:30. We're going to spend the same amount of time basically in class. We're going to shorten class a little, shorten breaks a little, so we can get people to the other meeting. So take 10 minutes to stretch.